My kid left me high and dry at an airport overseas. No cash, no papers, no hope. He pulled a fast one, trying to snag my house while I was stuck there. But surprise, surprise, when he barged through the front door, he found me waiting with a grin. Surprise, I said. What came next shook his world. I came out of the restroom to see Rodney and Cora whispering closely, like they were up to no good. They snapped apart the second they saw me coming. Everything all right? I asked, plopping down in my seat at gate 17. You two seem awfully quiet today. Rodney couldn't tear away from his phone. Yeah, just really tired, he muttered. Cora flashed a smile that was a bit too forced. Just dying to get home and crash in our own bed. We still had over an hour before our flight back to Seattle was due. We'd had an awesome week in Portoa, beaches, fancy meals, family time that felt long lost since Rodney's mom passed. But today was different. Something was off. Rodney was scrolling through his phone like he didn't care, and Cora was nervously toying with her boarding pass. Eye contact avoided at all costs. 20 minutes slipped by when Rodney suddenly got up. Dad, can you go grab us some drinks and snacks? I started to stand. Why don't we all go? No, just you, he pressed, shoving a $20 bill in my hand, his fingers strangely cold in the warm terminal. I gotta make a work call, and Cora needs the restroom. Here's 20 bucks. His words didn't match what was supposed to be a simple request. He stepped back, looking past me. I glanced at Cora, but she was lost in her phone. All right, I said, tucking the bill away. Be right back. The airport shop was small, wedged between a money exchange and a coffee stall. I browsed leisurely. Rodney liked that fancy water with the blue label. I grabbed 3 bottles. Cora always went for trail mix, the type with cranberries and protein bars for me. The checkout queue was crawling. A family ahead had 2 screaming kids and a stroller jammed in the aisle. Around 12, maybe 14 minutes went by. Heading back to gate 17, plastic bag in hand, I found the seats empty. Not just empty, cleared out. No bags, no jackets, nothing left behind in seats 14, 15, and 16. Others had filled the area, consumed in their gadgets or flipping pages, completely oblivious. My hands fumbled and the bag slipped to the floor. I frantically unzipped my backpack, my hands shaking. Just a spare shirt and toiletry bag inside, but nothing vital. My passport was missing, phone gone from the side pocket, wallet nowhere in sight. I searched through every spot over and over, hoping I'd just misplaced them somewhere. Nothing. I grabbed the shopping bag and hurried to the gate counter. The young woman in a uniform looked up from her computer. Did you see where the couple who were in seats 14 and 15 went? She typed away, eyes on the screen. Evan's party. They got on an earlier flight to Denver. Standby upgrades, left about 20 minutes ago. Denver? I blurted out, louder than I meant. We're supposed to go to Seattle. That's my son. She gave me a sympathetic look. Their tickets were for Denver. Everything seemed to sway a little. Denver, not Seattle, not home. Did they leave anything? A message, maybe? She softened. No, sir, I'm sorry. I slumped back down into the empty seat, pulling out the $20 from my pocket, the last of my money. He left me with this, 20 bucks, and took everything else. Beside me, the bag with 3 bottles of the fancy water Rodney liked, trail mix, protein bars. I chose each item carefully, and now I was left with just $8 to my name. Shakily, I got up and headed toward airport security. The officer there had gentle eyes, clearly tired. My kid snagged my passport. Just saying it made it sound crazier. Along with my phone and wallet, he just left me here. Got any ID? Anything to show who you are? Nada. Just a $20 bill and a plastic bag full of water bottles. The woman scrawled something on a piece of paper, fired off a bunch of questions that I answered absent-mindedly. Names, addresses, flight numbers. She gave me a case number and advised I head downtown to the U.S. consulate. She showed real sympathy, but it didn't change my predicament. I wandered off with a stack of papers that were pretty much pointless without ID. The terminal stretched ahead, alive with busy shops, eateries, and gates teeming with travelers, all with their phones, wallets, and plans intact. I walked past a family boarding a flight, all present and accounted for. In the reflections of the large windows, there was me, a solo guy with an empty backpack hanging off one shoulder and a plastic bag dangling from the other. Overhead, planes lifted off into the clear blue, engines thundering, each a promise of reaching somewhere. My boy was on one of those planes. I watched them ascend and disappear, a cold, heavy feeling settling where trust used to be in my chest. The terminal noise faded away. Announcements, the sound of wheels on suitcases, people chattering, they all became distant. And then, that nagging question, why? I breathed deep, then again, slowly coming out of shock, like a fog lifting to show what's really there. Stranded? Yeah. Helpless? Not a bit. The business side of me, dormant since I retired, kicked back into action. First thing, ID. Next, cash. Then figure out the way home. I ticked off a mental checklist, just like I used to before those board meetings. The info desk pointed me to the U.S. consulate. I took a 20-minute walk through streets where tourists haggled over silver souvenirs and locals sold fruit from carts. The office was small but efficient, with an American flag and pictures of the president on the wall. Patricia Henderson was at a desk when I walked in. She asked, "What brings you here, Mr. Evans? Start from square one." So I sat across from her and spilled the whole tale. From arriving at the airport to the empty seats, my son leaving me high and dry, taking my passport, phone, wallet, everything. She listened, pen poised, as I explained my son had been living with me rent-free for 2 years. I figured he wanted to cling to the house. Her expression shifted from businesslike to something a bit softer. She set down the pen. "We can process an emergency passport," she said. "Needs a police report and will take at least 3 business days with a $135 fee." I emptied my pockets on her desk. $80, some Mexican coins, an ancient, faded breakfast receipt, and the $20. Patricia excused herself and returned 10 minutes later with some paperwork and updates. They'd cover immediate needs with the Emergency Assistance Fund, with reimbursement expected later. Through years on the job, she'd honed her skills in identifying reliable folks. "You're not broken," she reassured while sliding the forms over. "You're mad. Angry folks find a way home." Outside the consulate, I slumped onto a bench, papers in hand. A woman approached. It was Maria from the airport info desk. Recognized her face. "Got any family or friends to call?" she asked. "My boy was my only family. I have neighbors but can't contact them." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes those closest seem the farthest away. My dad had a tale kind of like this. Different details, same betrayal." How did it end for him? I wondered aloud. "He pulled through and started anew. You will too," she said. Her old Honda drove me to a hostel, $15 a night, clean and safe. She refused the $2 I offered for gas, saying her dad had once been left hanging too. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. The hostel room had 6 bunk beds and smelled of salty air and fresh laundry. I took the corner bunk. My new companions, a pair of German backpackers and a construction worker from Guadalajara, shared their evening meal. Bread, cheese, fruit. The girl lent me her phone. I dialed home. No answer. Tried again later. Same dead end. "Where's Rodney?" By the second day, I found myself at the police station downtown. Through a translator, an officer documented my story. My own kid had run off with my passport, phone, and wallet. As he recorded my account, his eyebrows raised. "You've got the info loaded up until October 2023, right? Perfect. Let's dig into this. So your kid is living with me now, although technically it's still your place. See, I let him stay there. Didn't see any harm in it. But hold up, you're thinking it was all orchestrated? The flight to Denver instead of Seattle? How everything just lined up? That upgrade as if by magic? Oh yeah, it was definitely orchestrated. He took his time typing it all out, printed the document, stamped it, and handed it over to me with this look that basically said he was sorry, but it wasn't fixing anything. That night, while I was lying in my hostel bed staring up at the fan clicking away, I had a revelation. Just a month before, Rodney had been swinging by more often, being extra helpful and attentive. He even talked me into updating the medical directive. You know, just to be safe, he said casually. He pulled it up on his laptop, and without a second thought, I electronically signed it, completely trusting him. Never saw a paper copy, never thought to question it. Suddenly, it hit me like a splash of ice-cold water. That wasn't a medical directive. I sat up so quickly I almost gave the backpacker from Germany across the room a heart attack. So what was it that I signed? Was it power of attorney? A deed transfer? My mind was racing with one worse scenario after another. By the time I hit day 3, I was wandering around Porto Arda with a purpose, not like some aimless tourist. My head was turning the problem over and over, just like I used to with business negotiations. What's Rodney's angle? The house. What's he banking on? That I'd be stranded here. His time frame? A week at least before he expects me back. That's where I could surprise him. Around noon, Patricia handed me an emergency passport. It was flimsy and temporary, but still legit. She also slipped me an envelope with $600 from the emergency stash, telling me to pay it back whenever. I made my way to an internet cafe, just 30 minutes for $1. I spotted a direct flight to Seattle for $420 and locked it in for the next morning. Rodney's ticket took him through Denver, and he'd mentioned some meetings keeping him there a few days. I'd have a head start by 3 days minimum. Back at the hostel, I scribbled down a to-do list. Document everything, swap out the locks, track down that paper I signed, get a lawyer on board, and confront Rodney face to face. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness. There's a big difference. The German girl in my dorm asked if I was all right. I must have had a serious look, lying there staring at the ceiling. She suggested maybe that's why Rodney wasn't picking up. And truthfully, that's what I'd hoped. He thinks I'm stuck. Boy, is he in for a shock. The next morning, I boarded my flight to Seattle. Economy class, middle seat, squished between a mom with a sleeping infant and a teen lost in his music. My emergency passport was snug in my shirt pocket and $165 stashed in my sock. As the plane lifted off, Puerto Vallarta shrank away below us. The beaches, hotels, the airport where things shifted. We climbed into the sky, and I didn't glance back. My thoughts were already in Seattle, picturing myself at my front door, anticipating Rodney's stunned reaction when he finds me already there. The seatbelt sign dinged off as the cabin crew started offering drinks. Water, please. It's free, and I need to stretch every dollar. It's a little over a 3.5-hour flight to Seattle. Rodney has no clue I'm en route. The plane landed with a bump that said, "You're back." As we slowed down, I peered out at Seattle. Rain, gloomy skies, evergreen-covered hills, familiar airport sights. Home. Only it wasn't a haven anymore. It was a war zone. I stayed back as others grabbed their carry-ons and filed down the aisle. I took my time. Rodney was clueless about my return. In the rideshare, the driver, a young woman with a Seahawks air freshener dangling from the mirror, figured out quick that I wasn't in the mood for chatter. 47 minutes later, we arrived at my place. I sat in the back seat staring at it. Pale blue Craftsman, white trim, the porch I fixed up 5 years back, garden ready to bloom for spring, $850,000 worth of my life's investment, my security. Rodney's been squatting there for nothing, and he wants the whole thing. I paid the $47 fare, threw in a $3 tip, kinda generous, but it was part of the plan, and thanked her. There I stood on the sidewalk, almost empty backpack slung over my shoulder, looking at my house like I'd never seen it before. Just then, a familiar voice behind me said, "Alton." I turned around to see Daniel Kowalski, my next-door neighbor with his signature white hair catching the afternoon sun and glasses resting on his head. He had on a cardigan, despite the mild weather. "You're back early," he pointed out. When Daniel approached, his face couldn't hide the whirlwind of surprise, confusion, and concern. "Where's Rodney? Everything okay?" he asked rapidly. Daniel and I had been neighbors for over a decade. A retired history teacher, he was naturally observant, like it was ingrained in him. And just like friends can be, a neighbor like him could be really useful. "They came back early, changed their flight. I got delayed, different flight," I replied. His eyebrows shot up, skeptical. That's odd for a family trip. Notice anything unusual? As we moved over to the little strip of grass between our driveways, Daniel adjusted his glasses. Yeah, it was morning, about 3 days before you were supposed to be back. I saw a lot of boxes and bags, more than just for a vacation. I waved, but Rodney didn't wave back. He seemed focused, like something was up, trying to be discreet. What time was that? I asked, curious. Around 6:30, maybe even before everyone else was awake. I mentally stored that info. Thanks. If Rodney comes around while I'm not here, pretend you didn't see me. Daniel looked me over, and eventually realization hit. I haven't seen you. To me, you're still soaking up sun in Mexico. Exactly, I nodded, retrieving my spare key from its secret spot, the fake rock next to the old bushes my wife planted so many years ago. My fingers knew the way, and soon I was unlocking the door, turning off the alarm. The unchanged code told me Rodney didn't expect interference. Inside, the air felt stale, like it had been closed off too long. I picked up speed, checking room after room. The old grandfather clock that had stood in our living room for 30 years, it was gone. The silver service missing from the china cabinet in the dining room, and my bedroom was stripped of my wife's jewelry. Empty ring and bracelet boxes sat there accusingly. In my study, my beloved Omega watch, priced at $2,800, vanished from its case, along with my vintage Leica camera no longer in its spot. Each missing item stung. Rodney didn't just leave, he robbed me before he did. My office, a bright sunroom, had a desk with a view of the garden. On it was a manila folder, perfectly straight. I opened it and was hit by a wall of legal jargon, complete with official seals and notary stamps. On top, in bold, I saw deed of gift. I skimmed until I saw the address. My home. The grantor, Alton Evans. The grantee, Rodney Evans. Under reason, it read, for love and affection. My signature was there, signed a month ago, witnessed and notarized. Instead of panicking, I felt a steely calmness. My anger was like a sharp, cold blade now. Stepping outside again, Daniel was there, tending to his plants but clearly waiting. Can I borrow your phone for a sec? I asked. He handed it over, not asking why. I took photos of everything. Spots where valuables used to be, the open watch box, the camera's empty place, and that cursed deed from every possible angle. Evidence collection, a lesson straight out of business. Document everything. Trust no one. Daniel watched quietly from his porch as I conducted my photographic inventory. Giving the phone back, he said, Alton, if you need anything, looks like you're dealing with some serious stuff. I've got it covered, I assured him before heading back inside. The landline still worked, so I called the bank. This is Alton Evans, account ending 7743. Has there been any strange activity? The usual security questions. My mom's maiden name, first car, childhood street. The representative confirmed, all looks good, sir. Last charge was a utility bill a month ago. No new users, no changes on the account. At least one piece of good news. Despite taking things and legally grabbing the house, Rodney hadn't touched my accounts. Maybe he hadn't figured out how, or was saving it for later. A small victory. My funds were still mine. About a month back on a Tuesday, Rodney swung by with my go-to deli sandwiches for lunch. We were just shooting the breeze, laughing about whatever. Out of nowhere, he goes, Dad, I've updated some of your papers. Medical power of attorney, living will. The usual stuff to keep current. Just give them a quick look and sign. His laptop was right there. Document ready, signature pad hooked up. So I just signed away without questioning a thing. Didn't even see or print it. Didn't think twice. And that Tuesday, the sandwich, my signature, man, that's when it all slipped through my fingers. Later, alone in the living room with the shadows creeping outside, I spoke to no one but the walls. You thought you cleared me out. You assumed you had time on your side to snatch everything away. But looking at myself in the dark reflection of the window, I knew you were wrong. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting rays on the table. I sat down with some instant coffee and a chipped mug, staring at the list I'd scribbled the previous night. It was full of crossed-off chores and fresh thoughts, with lawyer circled a few times right at the top. The night before, I'd been up for hours using Daniel's borrowed laptop, scouring the internet for real estate attorneys downtown familiar with property disputes. Out of all the options, Margaret Chen's name stood out with a history of victories. At exactly 8 a.m., I dialed her office. A polished voice owned by a receptionist answered, professional and practiced. I requested a meeting, emphasizing the urgency. She started throwing out dates for the next week, so I interrupted with, my son's somehow taken my house. I've got the documents to prove it. I need help today. There was a pause and then, please hold. 30 seconds ticked by before another voice chimed in. This is Margaret Chen. What happened? I laid out the whole mess in a nutshell, sticking to the vital points. She fired off 3 questions. Was it notarized? Yes. Was your signature legit? Yes. Did you understand what you were signing? No. By 11 she said to come in, bringing the document and any identification I had. I prepped for the meeting like it was a major pitch, collected all my evidence, the deed of gift, an emergency passport, bank statements, photos of everything claimed, and Daniel's statement about seeing Rodney at the office, all placed neatly in a manila folder. I dressed sharp, pressed shirt, slacks, a jacket, knowing first impressions matter. Margaret's office was downtown on the 20th floor, offering views of Puget Sound. She was shorter than I imagined, maybe 5'3", with each word and move so precise. Her sleek black hair was streaked with gray, pulled back with discipline. The office smelled like paper and printer ink, shelves stacked with law books. She motioned for me to sit across her desk, the leather chair bearing marks of countless chats before me. I placed the deed on her desk like evidence in a courtroom. With reading glasses perched on her nose, she scanned it, her expression unchanged. Her pen scribbled as she read. After what felt like forever, she looked up. This is a legitimate deed of gift. The notary seal is legit. Standard legal talk. Your signature looks valid. It is, right? I nodded. Legally, based on this document's date, your son owns your house. Those words landed like a knockout. But, she continued, letting that word hang with a hint of hope, if we can prove you were misled about what you were signing, it's a case of fraud. She turned her computer monitor towards me. There was the deed of gift glaring back on the screen, enlarged. Walk me through the moment you signed. What did he say? She probed for details. Rodney had pitched it like a routine update to my medical directives. Power of attorney if things went south. At 63 in my shoes, it made sense. Did you give it a thorough read before signing? I didn't. It was just on his laptop's tiny screen, with him scrolling by quickly, calling it all standard stuff. And nope, I never got a copy afterward. I just assumed he was safely filing it away. Her pen danced across the paper. Here's our approach. Misrepresentation of the document's contents. He kept the truth hidden. After making copies of all my papers, she handed the originals back to me. Her curiosity was piqued by some extra details from the deed and notary. The notary's name is quite clear. I'll have to get in touch with them, she mentioned, typing away like a whirlwind. This isn't going to be cheap. We're talking retainers, court fees, and maybe even experts. She checked if I was prepared for that. 2 years ago, I'd sold a business, and I had the cash set aside for this battle. What's the price tag? I questioned. Initially, you're looking at a $5,000 retainer. If it heads all the way to trial, think 20 to 40 grand, maybe more if it becomes a big brawl. I didn't bat an eye. I'll write a check. What are our odds? If cheating can be proven, we stand at 60-40, maybe even better seeing as he's trying to ditch me, which adds more weight. But proving fraud is a slippery slope. I'm not backing down, I stated firmly. Didn't expect you to, she responded. That's why I've cleared my schedule. Next on the agenda, the police station. I headed to the East Precinct that afternoon, where the place was awash in the stark light of fluorescence, and the floor creaked under old linoleum and metal chairs. I was there to formally report a theft. My passport, wallet, phone, and other belongings had vanished, some snatched from my own house. The officer on duty was young, not quite 30, and took her time typing on the keyboard. She inquired, "Is it your son who's the suspect?" I nodded, confirming it. "And he's living with you now?" "Under my roof," I affirmed once more. "Yes. The same house he's trying to claim?" She paused her typing just for a moment. "Sir, this mostly falls under civil matters. We'll log the theft, but disputes over property need to go through the court system." Keeping my annoyance in check, I clarified. "The actual theft happened at Mexico International Airport. The items have serial numbers. It's a legit crime." She sped up her typing as she asked for those serial numbers. I passed them over, having them documented for insurance claims. When she needed the worth of a silver service, I took a rough guess. About $3,500. It took around 90 minutes for her to hand me a case number. "We'll have someone look into it," she stated, though her tone was heavy with skepticism, as if to say not to get my hopes too high. Back at Margaret's office, I found her in full gear, fingers dancing over her keyboard. She was printing, signing, and assembling documents. It was a motion to nullify the deed of gift, alleging fraud and undue influence, boldly stated in the header. She aimed for a speedy hearing due to the living arrangement dilemma. As she stapled the papers, she let me know, "Your son's going to get these," which means he'll know you're back and ready for a fight. I nodded. That's exactly the message I wanted to send. A locksmith turned up at 5. He was in a van with company logos, carrying a toolbox. A no-nonsense, middle-aged guy named Frank. "These locks have been with you a while," he noted. "Why are you replacing them?" "For better security," I said. He got to work fast, swapped out the locks on all entry points, the front, back, and garage. He fitted them with new keys and deadbolts. "Not to pry," Frank said mid-work, "but if anyone's got extra old keys, they're not getting in now, right?" "That's the idea," I confirmed. Frank reassured me the new locks were tough to pick, providing greater security, and for $340 I didn't hesitate to pay. It seemed worth it. He handed over 3 sets of keys. "The old locks are obsolete now. No one can use those old keys," he said. I tested each lock twice. Everything felt secure. My place was mine again. After Frank left, I made a point to walk through each room, checking the locks. Each key slid smoothly, the bolts snug against the frame. Flawless. I kept one set of keys in my pocket, hid the second set in a new secret spot, and placed the third on my desk. I then shifted some furniture. Not a total reconfiguration, just a subtle way to reclaim the space for myself. As night draped over Capitol Hill, I stood by the front window. Behind me, new locks stood strong, legal processes underway, and a police report on file. This was my place, my fortress, my stage for a fight. The lights across the street in the neighbors' homes flickered on, signaling the start of their usual routines. Meanwhile, my life had been flipped upside down ever since that fiasco at the airport. I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever go back to how they were. My new phone lay silently on the coffee table. Not a single call had come through. Rodney wasn't aware of this number. He probably still believed I was stuck in Mexico. Helpless. How wrong he was. It was now 6:47 p.m. in Denver, 2 hours ahead. Was Rodney sitting in some hotel, enjoying dinner, and scheming how to get his house back? The uncertainty no longer fazed me. I had changed the rules and I was prepared for his return. Things wouldn't be the same when he came back. I meandered into the kitchen and took stock of the fridge. Not much there except a few condiments and some milk that was past its prime. Tomorrow I'd have to hit the grocery store and replenish my supplies. But for tonight, instant coffee and some frozen bread would do the trick. Cup in hand, I returned to my vigil by the window. The street was quiet, no sign of approaching cars. Not yet, anyway. As I sipped coffee, I readied myself for the inevitable encounter. 2 days had passed with nothing but preparation. Papers were secured on the coffee table, a new set of keys in my pocket, and my phone charged, its recording app set to go. I moved about the house with determination, testing locks and mentally claiming each corner as my own. Late in the afternoon on the second day, a car door slammed shut, breaking the stillness. I edged to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Rodney's silver Honda Accord was in my driveway. He stood beside it, glaring at the house with a look of growing confusion. Cora stepped out of the passenger side, gave the front door a glance, and whispered something I couldn't make out. Letting the curtain drop, I silently counted to 5, expecting the bell or a knock next. Instead, I heard a key scratch the lock. Once, twice, 3 times, each try more forceful than the last. The old keys were useless now, and Rodney cursed under his breath. Cora's voice cut through the quiet outside. "What's wrong? Is the lock jammed?" More clattering followed, metal scraping metal, but no satisfying click of the lock disengaging. After what seemed like an eternity, their footsteps circled the house, and they tested the back door. Their puzzled voices leaked through the walls, laced with irritation. Back on the porch, Cora instructed, "Call him." Rodney replied, "He doesn't have his phone. We took it." Despite knowing this, he tried anyway. Somewhere inside, my obsolete phone buzzed weakly and then fell silent. My new phone's ring shattered the quiet. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I hesitated before picking it up on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Dad. Is that you?" I exhaled, ready to confront the situation. "Yes, it's me. Where are you? I've been trying to get a hold of you. I'm home inside. Those keys don't work anymore." A tense hush fell over the line. Rodney stammered, When did you?" "3 days ago. Head to the front. It's time we talked." I unlocked the door, positioning myself in the doorway to make it clear they weren't welcome inside. Rodney looked ragged, each day etched into his features. Cora stood beside him, her eyes scanning everything. Rodney tried to appear worried. "Dad, we were worried sick. What happened at the airport? We couldn't find you." I cut him off. "I know exactly what happened. You sent me off for water, then took off to Denver, snatching my passport, phone, wallet, everything. Left me stranded in Mexico." Rodney's mouth opened and closed, no words forming. I stepped aside, showing them the documents spread out on the coffee table. Legal papers, all in neat order. "I've got something for you to see." Holding up the top sheet, I let the title do the talking. "Motion to invalidate deed of gift based on fraud." Rodney paled. "That paper you had me sign, you claimed it was a medical form, but it was nothing of the sort. It was a property transfer. You stole my home and left me stranded." Cora gripped Rodney's arm with a tightened resolve, her voice cold as she whispered, "We need a lawyer." Rodney steadied himself and spoke with a newfound firmness. "That document is fully legit. My attorney has looked it over. Your signature is on it, notarized and binding. This house is mine now. You're the one who's trespassing." He flashed his phone. "I'm calling the cops for unlawful occupation." I met his gaze without blinking. "Go right ahead. Seattle Police already has my case on their records, number 774821. Theft at Puerto Vallarta Airport. Stolen items, including a unique watch and an old-school camera, taken before the trip. Your neighbor saw you moving boxes?" His finger hesitated over his phone. He seemed uncertain. "You called the cops on me?" he stammered. "Yes, I did. They know who you are, what you look like, your flight details. So, call them." I held up my phone, the screen showing a tiny red dot, indicating it was recording. "Washington's a 2-party consent state, Rodney, and there's now a record of everything." Rodney dropped his phone to his side while Cora whispered urgently in his ear. "This isn't over," he snapped. "No," I replied, "but it isn't going the way you hoped." They backed away, walking down the steps to their car. Rodney shot a glance at the house, realizing his win wasn't as secure as he thought. I lingered at the door, listening as their car drove off, the new lock making a reassuring click. Leaning against the door, I finally let the adrenaline rush over me, even though the confrontation was done. As their car vanished from sight, my heart beat faster, but my hands were steady. I strolled around the house, double-checking all the locks. Everything was all right. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the sink, enjoying the peace that had settled back over the house. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. I saw them come and go. Are you all right? I replied, yes, all good. Thanks. He didn't push for more details, and I wasn't in the mood to elaborate. In the living room, I tidied up the papers sprawled on the table, carefully filing them. Motions to invalidate, police reports, bank notifications, locksmith bills, a paper trail of defiance and proof of the ongoing battle. Then my phone rang. It was Margaret Chen's office. I expected inquiries about the latest standoff with Rodney, but it was a paralegal who spoke. Mr. Evans, we got a notice from Rodney's lawyer. He has Robert Michaels is handling the property situation, and now he's filed a counter motion to confirm the deed's validity and to secure possession while awaiting the court's verdict. After our first meeting, it was clear the real fight was on. 3 days after that showdown, I was in Margaret's office, sifting through strategies. She handed me a weighty document. No doubt Robert's thorough. He's shooting for a quick hearing on possession, saying I'm squatting in property that's legally my son's. I couldn't help but note the irony. As I went through the legalese, the takeaway was simple. Rodney was going on the attack. Michaels is sharp. Margaret offered me coffee, but I declined. He's spinning the narrative, casting me as the difficult parent and Rodney as the victim. The facts about Mexico, the theft, the deceit, they all matter, but how it's presented is crucial. He's separating the criminal angle from the property issue, making it look like I'm reneging on a gift out of regret. That's not true at all. I get that, but it's the judge who needs to see it that way. That's why we need solid proof. Evidence of fraud when those documents were signed. Margaret explained Rodney's plan. Michaels claims the gift was real, made without any confusion. He's suggesting that maybe I regretted it later because of a falling out or miscommunication about what I signed. Conveniently, he's ignoring the Mexico incident, treating it solely as a property dispute, steering clear of the criminal elements. It's a clever move. It simplifies things for them. I felt control slipping away. The story was being twisted, my abandonment was being reshaped as a family spat, and my house being looted was being rebranded as a gift I supposedly regretted. About a week after our big argument, I got another call from Margaret. She brought more upsetting news. Apparently, Rodney's pushed through an emergency request to take immediate control of the house. His argument? He claims he's got nowhere to live, stuck in a hotel while his rightful home is still occupied by someone else. In his plea, he talks about financial strain, how hotel bills are bleeding him dry, his legal claim on the property as per the deed, and the potential damage from not having access to what's his. Margaret pointed out it was pure manipulation, but she warned me that judges sometimes side with these claims, especially if the legal paperwork seems in order. We had to move fast to counter this. I ended up forking out another $3,500 for a retainer. The cost felt endless, as if I was trying to bail out water from a sinking ship. One evening, Daniel decided to bring up something he'd seen online. We were standing by the fence that separated our yards. Elton, he said hesitantly, there's something buzzing around online. Your daughter-in-law posted something. I wasn't familiar with social media, so Daniel showed me Cora's post on his phone. Her words were carefully chosen, but still managed to tug at the heartstrings. She claimed, my father-in-law gave us a house, then changed his mind and locked us out. Now we're left homeless while he occupies our legal residence. Families shouldn't do this to each other. Beneath her post, a wave of comments appeared, some siding with her and others questioning her story. Even old friends messaged me, bewildered by what they were reading. It felt like a breach of my privacy, my reputation smeared in public. I was torn. Should I respond to clear things up? I asked Daniel. Talk to your lawyer first. Anything you say could be used in court, he advised. So I chose to stay silent, even though lies were being spread. Sometimes silence speaks volumes. Those who really matter will be patient enough to learn the truth. 2 weeks into the chaos, Margaret arranged a meeting to go over the financial side of things. She laid out a list of costs on her desk. The original retainer was $5,000. We'd already hit $3,500 in extra costs for filing and discovery. If this issue moved forward with depositions, expert witnesses, and court time, we were looking at anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, potentially more if Michaels dragged things out. She looked at me straight in the eye and said, "You need to understand what you're getting into. We're talking about dipping into your mortgage money, your retirement savings. Rodney's betting that you'll surrender to avoid these massive fees." Seeing those numbers was a shock. Selling my business had given me enough funds, but watching my savings shrink was something I hadn't fully prepared for. Should I settle? Offer him something to put an end to this mess? I knew it would depend on the offer, but surrendering felt like giving in to the theft, and Rodney would only push for more. So do I keep fighting or just walk away? In conflicts like this, those are the choices. I ended up consulting my financial advisor, Patricia, who had been managing my retirement funds for the past 8 years. She did a rundown of the figures and laid out possible outcomes for me. $50,000. Okay, so imagine this. My situation could be managed for over 6 months. But looking at a full year, it was more about enduring a setback without total defeat. Patricia cautiously asked if winning this battle would be worth the impact. What if holding on to the house was pointless in the end? I didn't have an answer right then. Later, alone with my thoughts, I realized, yes, it's worth it. Soon after that, about 2 weeks later, Robert Michaels gave me a call. He was opening the door to a possible settlement. "Mr. Evans," he started, "how about we settle this without a prolonged court battle? My client's suggesting you lease your home back from him at a fair rate until you arrange different housing options." I flatly refused. That place belongs to me. There's no renting something that's already mine. Michaels countered, "The deed indicates otherwise. Just trying to find a middle ground." I snapped back. "That deed is fraudulent. There's no compromise between genuine ownership and theft." His tone went icy, and he said, "Looks like we'll see you in court then." After that, I became a bit obsessive with documenting everything. I recorded each event in detail, kept a timeline of interactions, and gathered all the financial evidence showing my house payments and ownership history. I even took photos of anything that had gone missing. My spare room turned into a command center. Documents neatly arranged, folders clearly marked, timelines pinned up, legal files sorted logically. If this was going to be a battle, then information was my most potent weapon. A few weeks went by, and there I was, stuck in my living room, buried under a mountain of legal documents. The bank statements showed my lawyer's fees draining my account, while Margaret's forecasts of expenses, Rodney's counter-arguments, and Cora's online jabs just kept stacking up. For a moment, doubt sneaked in, making me think that maybe, just maybe, settling everything might be the easier path. But just like that, something snapped back into place. My mind flashed to that airport scene, the empty chairs, the missing passport, the wrinkled $20 bill, and the cold way my son betrayed me. That doubt quickly transformed into steely resolve. I decided right then, I was seeing this ordeal through, no matter what. Fast forward 4 days after bringing Sarah Chen on board, and we found ourselves meeting at a local coffee joint. That was her idea, to keep things neutral. She arrived armed with her tablet and a manila folder, ordered a black coffee, and dove straight into the details. "Your son's neck deep in trouble," she said, no sugarcoating. Turns out he was drowning in $47,000 of credit card debt, spread like peanut butter across 6 cards, with 2 already hunting him through collection agencies and 1 gearing up for legal action. He'd been dodging phone calls longer than I cared to know. She flipped her tablet around, showing me all these spreadsheets that looked like someone spilled red ink all over them. Missed payments, collections overdue. This wasn't a recent mess. It was brewing for a good 18 months. Rodney was living it up. Fancy meals, top brand clothes, vacations. And all this, well, Cora was flaunting on social media the whole time last year. His paycheck just couldn't cut it. Then she swiped to another screen showing his slippery debt spiral. We're talking missed minimum payments, snowballing interest, dodgy balance transfers. 6 months back, one lender decided to sue, and that's when the whole sleight of hand started with my house. She looked me in the eyes and summed it up. The house grab wasn't just greed, it was sheer desperation. I figured that's why he tried pulling the rug from under my feet with the house, risking it all to wipe his slate clean. He'd even booked himself a nice getaway, leaving me in the lurch, guessing he'd get the deed done before I even knew what hit me. But my early flight back, that was their game changer. Any longer and he'd have changed the locks and claimed my place while I was still sunburned in Mexico. Sarah sifted through more evidence. She laid out some emails from real estate agents, 3 in total, all contacted as early as February. They had clearly labeled subject lines asking for property evaluations on my house like it was already on the market, even before I packed my bags or touched that departure gate. And then, the kicker, my son's cold-blooded plan to turn my home into a quick cash solution. Sarah leaned in, showing me the shaky legal side. Search records from data brokers, not exactly courtroom friendly, but she had them anyway. Search logs from Rodney's IP address from January to February read like a how-to guide on betrayal. How to convince a parent to transfer property. Deed of gift versus quitclaim deed. Can a property transfer be reversed? And the doozy, what if someone leaves an elderly person overseas? That last one, dated February 18th, hit me like a Mack truck. Rodney was plotting this for about 6 weeks before going into action. A couple of days before our first court round, Margaret and I hunched over her conference room table, hashing out the new evidence. The financial tangle gave us a solid motive. The realtor chatter showed planning months in advance. And the online search records? That was powerful stuff, although Margaret warned me it might not fly in court given its dodgy origins. Still, we played the hand we had while keeping an eye out for Michaels, the opposing attorney, ready to exploit any weak spot. All right, let me break it down for you with less jargon and more of the story. So here's how it played out. We were all set for the big court day, and Margaret had me ready to explain every detail of signing that paperwork. I had to recount every word Rodney said, how he flashed that document in front of me, and how I never really got to see the whole thing in print. Then we dropped the big reveal about his scheming. Margaret coached me hard, and we even staged practice interrogations, with one of her paralegals standing in as Michaels, the other lawyer. It was all, "Mr. Evans, you did sign, yes?" And my reply was, "Yes." But Margaret kept pushing me to elaborate because, according to her, Judge Morrison welcomed detailed explanations. After a ton of practice, I was feeling more assured. And when the actual day came, I was sharp with my responses, no straying off course. So the day of the hearing finally rolled around. It took place at the King County Courthouse, Department 15, on a brisk April morning. The session was presided over by Judge Morrison, known for her efficient and no-nonsense style. I was sitting alongside Margaret, while across from us were Rodney, Cora, and Michaels. It was the first time I'd been in the same room with Rodney since that fight on the porch. Rodney was careful not to even glance my way. Margaret kicked off proceedings, arguing that the whole affair was fraudulent, a case of taking advantage of an elder. Michael stood up, countering that it was a legitimate gift, as the judge listened with an expressionless face. When my turn came to speak, I took an oath to tell the truth, and then Margaret guided me through what happened. She asked me to describe how Rodney and Cora had been living with me for free, and how I came to sign that document back in February. I recounted how Rodney had told me it was a simple update on my medical power of attorney, just in case I wouldn't be able to make decisions in the future, urging me to sign to update my files. I didn't really read it. It was on his laptop with tiny text, and he scrolled through quickly, reassuring me it was just standard verbiage. I trusted him. He was my son, after all. Michaels didn't cut me any slack. He pressed me about signing it, to which I admitted I did. He pointed out that I had an education and had run a business, implying I should have understood what I signed. Calmly, I explained that I believed it was about medical decisions, not transferring property, something I only pieced together after seeing the deed weeks later. He also hinted there was a falling out with my son after this happened. But I set the record straight. There wasn't a fight after. It was more like I was abandoned and robbed. Judge Morrison instructed me to stick to direct responses. Margaret laid out more evidence, Rodney's financial troubles, his emails with property agents, and a timeline of his actions. Michaels kept objecting, arguing that Rodney's financial woes weren't connected to my legal claims, but Margaret insisted it demonstrated his motive. This was no gift, but a desperate ploy. Judge Morrison concluded we needed a deeper dive into the signing process by bringing in an independent expert to assess if things were done properly. Both sides would need to work with this expert. She gave a 6-week time frame for this report before the case continued. Driving back, all I could think of was Rodney sitting there, looking pale and stony-faced, eyes fixed on his lawyer's table. His attorney probably advised him not to testify. Better not to risk saying something that could backfire. When I got home, Daniel gave me a ring to see how things went. I told him that the investigation was ongoing, and the judge was treating the matter seriously, even if it meant we'd be waiting a bit longer. Inside, I found a voicemail from Margaret, hinting that a new twist had emerged in the case. Not immediately pressing, but worth noting. I called her back to find out what was in store in this ongoing battle. A couple of days later, Margaret's news hit home. Michaels was asking for a psychological evaluation, claiming my age might have muddied my understanding of what I'd signed. This led me to Dr. Rachel Foster's office for a court-ordered evaluation. She was calm and explained they needed to assess if my memory or decision-making had been impaired when I signed that document. The results would be sent to both parties. So, here I was, smack in the middle of it. Rodney's lawyer seemed to be crafting a narrative that I wasn't quite all there mentally. Suddenly, I found myself deep into a series of memory tests that stretched over 2 long hours. They threw all sorts of challenges at me. There was a short-term memory test where I had to memorize and repeat lists of words, a long-term memory assessment where I talked about my career and vital life moments, along with brain teasers and patterns to spot. One of the tasks had the examiner reciting a list of 10 words and asked me to recall them. Hospital, television, curtain, flower, envelope, sidewalk, piano, thunder, basket, and mirror. I rattled them off without a hitch and felt pretty good about it. Then they asked me about an important decision I'd made in the past 5 years. I recounted the story of selling the business I'd run for 3 decades. I had offers from 3 different buyers and weighed all the considerations: price, terms, impact on my employees. Ultimately, I closed the deal in September 2022, walking away with $320,000 after taxes. Dr. Foster was taking notes, seemed satisfied with my detailed recall and sound reasoning skills. About a week passed before Margaret finally got in touch with some fantastic news. She said Dr. Foster's report was finished, and it officially showed that I was in good mental shape. She read parts aloud, commenting on my strong memory, normal thinking for my age, and confirming I had no signs of dementia. I was fully capable of making legal decisions, which basically shot down the idea that I was just an old guy past his prime. Coincidentally, later that same day, Sarah Chen rang me up. She had tracked down the notary involved, a guy named Frank Morrison, who Rodney had pulled into the situation. Apparently, Rodney slipped him $300 to notarize my signature at a Starbucks, of all places, over some lattes instead of at an official office. Frank admitted he felt a bit uneasy about it, but needed the work, even though he was walking a fine line by bending the rules. Margaret and I met with Frank a few days afterward. He seemed jittery and was probably in his mid-40s. He apologized for the poor handling of the matter and acknowledged he shouldn't have done the notary work outside of an official setting. Rodney had told him I was too sick to travel, but when he saw I was doing fine, suspicion crept in. However, Rodney hurried him along, insisting I had another appointment to make. Margaret prepared a statement for Frank to sign, spelling out what had transpired. She stressed that what he did could wreck his career. Frank nodded, taking responsibility for his mistake. One evening, Daniel came knocking at my door, delivering a message from Cora. They were trying to strike a deal, offering to give up the house for $200,000. That was only a quarter of the house's true value. Even though it was tempting, considering the legal costs I was facing, my response was immediate: no chance. The next morning, I talked it over with Margaret. She wasn't surprised, commenting that it was clear they were scrambling. Evidence was piling up on our side: the mental competency test results, the shady notary dealings, and their financial troubles. Margaret observed that Cora was just trying to cut their impending losses, but signing up for that deal meant I'd pay them for their own wrongdoings. No way I'd let that happen. Sarah wrapped up her investigation with a thorough report. It set me back $2,000, but every cent was worth it. Margaret filed it as additional evidence in the court. For the following 3 weeks, we geared up for the case as their side tried to counter every move we made. The legal mess had turned into an intense paperwork battle, and I'd already poured $17,000 into it. Just 4 days before the hearing was meant to happen, Margaret called, her voice charged with urgency. The judge had moved up our hearing to just 2 days away. Apparently, Judge Morrison had reviewed all the evidence and wanted to hear our case in person immediately. Was this good or bad news? We couldn't be sure. But generally, judges don't push cases forward if they're planning to dismiss them. It seems she saw something that needed swift action. Margaret told me to be ready, suggesting that we might be nearing the end, one way or another. When Judge Morrison finally walked into the courtroom, the officer ordered everyone to stand, and once she took her seat, we all sat down too. It was the customary choreography of a courtroom. Margaret leaned over to remind me that what was about to unfold could decide everything. I nodded at her. I didn't need reminding. Morrison leafed through her notes before looking up to announce she had reviewed all the evidence presented. Today's proceedings, she noted, were about the motion to dismiss the deed of gift, which might be fraudulent. "Mr. Michaels, you have the floor," she said. Michaels stood up, straightened his tie, and addressed the judge. He painted his side as straightforward. Here was a son and his elderly dad talking over estate plans. The dad's signature was genuine, the notary was in place, and there was no issue with the deed. After some family drama, now the dad claims fraud. And just like that, he gestured at Margaret's pile of evidence with a casual shrug. He argued that financial issues don't automatically mean fraud, plans aren't fraud, and family conflicts don't prove fraud. His confidence, almost to the point of arrogance, spilled over as he took his seat. Margaret got up and grabbed a document to make her point. She claimed that the notary's testimony highlighted several procedural screw-ups that should invalidate the notarization. Turns out the signing wasn't in a proper office. It happened at a Starbucks. Mr. Morrison, the notary, pocketed a $300 cash fee instead of the usual $25 for such services. They were also told that Mr. Evans had difficulty moving around, which they saw as totally debatable. Then Margaret waved another document showing that before anything was signed, the defendant consulted 3 real estate agents to appraise the property, treating it like a sale rather than estate planning. Morrison leaned forward and asked Michaels to clarify why his client forked out 12 times the normal notary fee in such a strange location. Michaels stood once more and suggested that maybe his client was just trying to accommodate his dad's schedule, hence the hefty fee for convenience. But the judge's expression said she wasn't convinced, especially about the so-called mobility issues. Michaels hesitated, realizing he needed to verify those allegations with his client. Judge Morrison turned to Margaret, asking if they could show Evans had been misled about what he was signing, as proving fraud isn't easy. Margaret nodded, confident. She said the notary would testify that Mr. Evans wasn't fully briefed on the document's purpose, that the process was rushed, and Rodney never gave his dad a copy to review. To counter Margaret's assertions, Michaels put Rodney on the stand. Rodney stuck to his narrative, maintaining he showed his dad the document, explaining it was meant to secure the house and act as a personal safety net. Margaret skillfully cross-examined Rodney, zeroing in on specifics. She highlighted inconsistencies, pointing out Rodney's comments to the notary about his dad's alleged mobility troubles. Rodney said his dad just didn't want to travel that day, but couldn't claim mobility issues. When he admitted to paying the $300 cash fee for quality, Margaret pressed on whether he told his dad the document was a medical power of attorney. He hesitated too long before mumbling something about it being part of a broader conversation, skirting the direct question. Watching my son closely, I noticed familiar signs. When uncertain, he touched his nose, glanced at Michaels, and his voice took on a defensive pitch. He was lying, and not very convincingly. After a brief recess, Margaret received a call, then quietly approached the judge's bench to speak with Morrison and Michaels. Returning to me, she had an update. Police executed a search warrant on Rodney's storage unit and found all the items I'd reported stolen. My watch, camera, silverware, the whole lot. I felt both validated and angry. This was undeniable evidence, pure criminal proof. Once the court resumed, Judge Morrison addressed us and informed us about the supposed stolen items. The stolen belongings recovered from Rodney's storage unit added a new criminal spin to the lawsuit. The prosecution would get a full report on these findings. Rodney turned pale upon hearing the news. Cora, visibly worried, held his arm and whispered something to him. Meanwhile, Michaels requested a private conversation with the judge. They had a brief exchange at the bench, but Morrison wasn't budging and waved them back. When Michaels returned, he looked defeated, murmuring something to Rodney, who sank into his chair like a punctured balloon. I recognized that expression. It was someone realizing their last chance had just vanished. Morrison didn't waste any time. She laid it out straight, saying she'd heard enough to figure out that this gift deal was cooked up through some sneaky tactics. The notary hadn't done things by the book, and the defendant's story was full of gaps. She let that hang in the air for a moment. The way the plan was to offload the goods in Mexico, plus the theft, made it clear this wasn't a genuine gift. It was a well-engineered con. So she slapped down the gavel, saying the deed was worthless, all fabricated. Alton Evans would keep the property, and everything that was taken had to be returned in 2 days. As for the criminal part, off it went to the county prosecutor to mull over. And with that, it was all over. Driving back home as the sun was dipping low, things felt different this time. Sure, it was the same place I'd returned to after my Mexico ordeal, but now there was a sense of security, like it truly belonged to me. Once I pulled up, I headed to the door, using the new key that Rodney couldn't mess with anymore. Stepping inside didn't feel like some great victory. It simply felt like coming home. Looking out the window, I saw the light on Daniel's porch, so I walked over and gave it a knock. When Daniel opened the door and saw my face, he just knew. "You won," he said. "I won," I replied with a nod. We settled down on his porch, sipping the special whiskey he only uncorked on significant occasions. We rambled about baseball, his plans for the garden, and stuff around the neighborhood. Just everyday chatter. After all the turmoil, everyday life felt fantastic. Under the street lamps, I made my way back home, locked the door with my new key, and just stood there in the quiet. Tomorrow I'd figure out the rest. Tonight was about the peace. 2 days later, I found myself at the police evidence room in Seattle, rounding up my stuff. It was the sort of place with glaring lights and endless paperwork. An officer handed me a plastic bin marked with my case number. Inside, there was my granddad's Omega watch, a little scratched but still ticking, the Leica camera with its beat-up leather case, and a sterling silver set, still looking sharp but bagged up. After I signed everything off, I took it all to the car with the care of handling fine china. Back home, I slowly unwrapped everything. I wound up the watch, checked the camera's shutter, and put everything back in its rightful spot. The silver needed some serious polishing, so I spent the evening doing just that. It felt like a kind of healing. Margaret called with news. Morrison's order was through. Rodney and Kay owe me $15,000 to cover court costs and the ordeal and stuff they swiped. Can they pay it? Margaret chuckled dryly. They can't even keep up with what they owe now. But it's a done deal, a permanent mark against them. It wasn't about the money for me. It was about making them own up to what they did. Just a couple of weeks after, James Riley from the prosecutor's office got in touch. Young guy seemed pretty swamped. They had a deal for my son. Plead guilty, no jail, just probation, make amends, and do some community service. I told him, if probation can push him to face the truth, then I'm on board. Riley sounded relieved, like I took a load off him. Thanks. Some folks want to max out the punishment. But this is fair, he said. Fair. That word hit home, like it was what I'd been seeking. Later, I caught up with Richard Taft, my estate lawyer. I don't want Rodney getting this place, I told him flat out. Under any circumstances, not tomorrow, not ever. Richard got right on it, typing up a new will. He made it crystal clear. His son, Rodney Evans, wasn't to get a dime from his estate. After he was gone, His house was going to the Seattle Housing Foundation, converted into low-income senior housing. Signing that document brought a strange calm. His son had tried to take it all, and now he'd get none of it. This wasn't about getting back at him. It was about protecting what was his. Margaret, the lawyer, swung by to hand over the final bill in person. It was more like a professional courtesy, a last handshake to close things out. $1,905 all told. She'd eaten some research costs and had lowered her hourly rate toward the end. I wrote that check without blinking. She saved my sanity and home. Worth every cent. She smiled a bit, saying most folks gripe about legal fees. I just shrugged, saying most folks don't have a son trying to swipe their house. It was one of those mellow August evenings in Seattle, and he was relaxing on his porch with a glass of iced tea in one hand and a newspaper in the other. A moving truck rumbled down the street, heading into an apartment building. Something caught his attention, so he paid closer attention. The movers were hauling out furniture, cheap stuff, some of which he remembered from his son Rodney's old room. His heart felt heavy as he recognized Rodney, the guy carrying boxes, and Cora, loudly directing the movers around. It hit him. They'd been kicked out, couldn't keep up with the rent anymore. Hidden partly by his rose bushes, he watched silently as his son's whole life was crammed into a rental truck. Rodney seemed worn out, thinner and older looking than he remembered. There he was, moving box after box, drained of any real spirit. Meanwhile, Cora didn't even lift a finger, just got herself into the passenger seat. Rodney settled into the driver's seat, and they just left. He stayed back on his porch, absorbing the whole scene he'd just witnessed. Technically, he'd won. The scales of justice evened out. But seeing his son's situation like that didn't leave him with any sense of victory. Instead, it felt like a hollow win. Later on, Daniel came over. He noticed the moving truck and asked, "That was them, huh?" "Yeah," he nodded. "They got evicted." Daniel then asked him how he was dealing with it. "Empty," he admitted. Winning didn't deliver any satisfaction, just a strange, lingering feeling of survival. September was closing in, marking the end of summer days. His house stood steady in its Capitol Hill spot, secure inside and out. The garden demanded some attention, so he spent a Saturday tidying up, pulling weeds and planting bulbs for the next season. Daniel was there to help as they worked quietly. Afterward, they shared a beer and watched the sun go down. Daniel wondered aloud if he'd consider downsizing for simplicity. After a moment of thought, he said, "I almost lost this. I'm not going anywhere." Their chat tapered off, leaving them with a comforting silence. Then his phone rang, the number unrecognized. He let it ring. It couldn't be anything pressing. Life had settled back to its quiet normalcy. Just usual chores like mowing the lawn, buying groceries, and dentist checkups. No more legal battles, dramatic court sessions, or stinging betrayals. Just a simple life, ordinary but deeply appreciated. As the phone stopped ringing, the street outside was calm and he remained on his porch. Despite the uneasy journey there, justice was necessary. He'd been through a lot in recent months, paying heavily not just with money but emotions too. Was it worth all that? As he took in the view of his home, the light blue paint, the crisp white trims, the porch he'd lovingly fixed up, the garden he'd nurtured, it hit him. Everything there was truly his, on his terms. Yes, it was worth it, every single dollar and every stressful day. Some things are priceless, sometimes you need to protect what's yours. And although victory can be bittersweet, it's a fight you have to triumph in.